My name is Jacob, and I work as an insurance investigator in a medium-sized city in Texas. I've been married to Emily for 9 years. She works as an accountant at a law firm while I investigate insurance claims. It might sound boring, but my job has taught me to notice details that other people miss, details that would soon change everything about my life. Everything changed when Blake arrived in town, my former college roommate. He opened a small restaurant in the city center and quickly became popular among locals. Emily was thrilled with his culinary skills, and we started dining there regularly. The food was exceptional, the atmosphere cozy, and Blake seemed genuinely happy to reconnect with old friends. Blake often joined us at our table after closing time. He told fascinating stories about his life in California, working as a chef in prestigious restaurants. Emily listened to him with admiration, hanging on every word, while I was just happy that my old friend had settled in so well. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the way she looked at him during those conversations. The first warning signs appeared after 3 months. Emily began frequently mentioning Blake in our conversations. Blake said this wine pairs perfectly with fish, or Blake showed me how to properly season meat. At first, this even pleased me. It seemed like she had found a new hobby, something that brought joy to her life. But then I noticed she started dressing differently when we went to the restaurant. More elegantly than usual. She would spend longer getting ready, checking herself in the mirror several times, adjusting her hair and makeup with unusual care. When I complimented her appearance, she would blush and say she just wanted to look nice when we went out. The real alarm bells went off on a Thursday evening. I came home from work and couldn't find Emily anywhere. I called her. She said she was staying late at work with reports. Her voice sounded slightly strained, but I attributed it to work stress. However, when I drove past Blake's restaurant at 9 in the evening, I saw her car in the parking lot. The restaurant was already closed, all the lights were off except for one dim light in the back. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at her silver Honda Civic. My mind raced through possible explanations. Maybe she was helping Blake with bookkeeping? Maybe they were planning a surprise for someone? But deep down, a cold knot of suspicion was forming in my stomach. The next morning, I asked Emily how her evening went. She told me about complicated reports and how long she had to sit in the office, organizing financial documents for an important client. Not a single mention of the restaurant, not a word about seeing Blake. She looked me straight in the eyes as she lied, buttering her toast with practiced normalcy. My profession taught me not to jump to conclusions but to gather facts systematically. For the next 2 weeks, I observed carefully like I would any insurance case. Emily increasingly stayed late at work, but when I called her office, the secretary said she had left early. Phone conversations that she quickly ended when I entered the room. New perfume that she started wearing. Something expensive and sensual that I had never smelled on her before. I started documenting everything in a small notebook I kept in my car. Times, dates, inconsistencies in her stories. Tuesday, said she was at a client meeting until 8 p.m., but her office building was dark when I drove by at 7:30. Friday, claimed she was grocery shopping, but came home with only a small bag of items that couldn't have taken 2 hours to purchase. But what alarmed me most was what happened last week. I ran into Blake at the supermarket and he seemed strangely nervous. Our conversation was awkward. He kept glancing around, fidgeting with items in his cart, and barely made eye contact. This wasn't the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. The Blake I knew was confident, charismatic. This man seemed like he was carrying a heavy secret. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Emily, listening to her steady breathing, trying to understand what was happening. Maybe I was being paranoid? Maybe I was just creating problems in my head? But my professional instincts, honed by years of investigating insurance fraud, told me something was very wrong. The decision came by itself the next day. A client walked into my office asking me to investigate a suspicious restaurant fire. When he gave me the address, my heart stopped. It was Blake's restaurant. I drove to the scene and saw the charred remains. The fire had happened overnight when no one was supposed to be there. The official version was an electrical short in the kitchen equipment. But something bothered me about the whole situation. The pattern of burn damage, the timing, the way certain areas were completely destroyed while others remained relatively intact. Speaking with the firefighters, I learned an interesting detail. They had found evidence of 2 people being present in the restaurant shortly before the fire. Female and male footprints in areas where customers wouldn't normally go. Meanwhile, Blake claimed he had been home alone, watching television and going to bed early. I began digging deeper, using all my professional resources and contacts. It turned out Blake had serious financial problems. Debts to suppliers, overdue rent payments, equipment loans he couldn't service. The restaurant that looked successful from the outside was actually bleeding money. The insurance sum for the restaurant was quite substantial, enough to pay off all debts and start a new life somewhere else. But the most shocking discovery was what I found in our insurance company's archives. Blake had filed for increased coverage just 1 week before the fire. The policy had been expedited through unusual channels, and the insurance agent listed on the paperwork was Emily. Everything clicked into place like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. My wife wasn't just cheating on me, she was helping her lover commit insurance fraud, using her accounting knowledge and my professional connections. The betrayal was deeper and more calculated than I had imagined. I sat in my office, staring at the documents spread across my desk. Emily was risking not only our marriage but her career, her freedom, her entire future. All for Blake. The woman I had shared 9 years of my life with, who I had trusted completely, was willing to throw everything away for a man she had known for only a few months. That night I came home and found Emily in the kitchen. She was cooking dinner and seemed unusually cheerful, humming softly to herself as she moved around the kitchen with practiced grace. "Hi, honey. How was work today?" she asked, kissing me on the cheek with lips that had probably kissed another man just hours before. "Interesting. Today I investigated the fire at Blake's restaurant. Sad story." I watched her reaction carefully, using skills I had developed interviewing potentially fraudulent claimants. She froze for just a moment, her hands stopping mid-motion as she stirred the sauce, but quickly regained her composure. "Yes, terrible. Poor Blake worked so hard to develop his business. Yes, it's particularly interesting that he increased his insurance coverage right before the fire. Almost as if he knew something was going to happen." Emily turned back to the stove, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the heat. Maybe just a coincidence. Maybe. Although my experience tells me such coincidences don't exist in this business. Over the next few days I thought through my plan carefully. Simply accusing them of insurance fraud wouldn't be enough. I needed solid evidence. A confrontation might lead to them denying everything or disappearing from the city before I could prove anything. I needed to be smarter, more strategic. The solution came unexpectedly. I remembered a small detail I had noticed at the fire scene. A security camera from the neighboring building was pointed directly at the restaurant's entrance. If I was lucky, there might be recordings from that night. The building owner turned out to be cooperative. For a small fee, he allowed me to review the footage from that night. What I saw exceeded all my expectations and confirmed my worst fears. The recording clearly showed Emily and Blake entering the restaurant at 11:30 p.m. An hour later they emerged, and 20 minutes after that the fire began. Emily was carrying a bag she hadn't had when she went in, probably containing accelerant or the equipment used to start the fire. I made a copy of the recording and drove home. Emily wasn't back from work yet. I sat at my computer and began crafting a plan that would give them exactly what they thought they wanted, but in a way that would destroy them both. Instead of going straight to the police or confronting them directly, I decided to play their own game. If they thought they were smarter than everyone else, let them prove otherwise. I would give them enough rope to hang themselves. The next morning I called Blake and asked for a meeting. I said I wanted to discuss some details about the insurance payout, making it sound routine and professional. We met at a cafe on the other side of town. Blake looked nervous and tired, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. His usual confident demeanor was replaced by fidgety anxiety. "Jacob, I'm so grateful for your help with the insurance. I don't know what I would have done without your support." "Don't mention it, old friend. By the way, there's one small problem with the documents. It seems someone saw 2 people near the restaurant on the night of the fire. I'll have to investigate this matter more thoroughly." The color drained from Blake's face. "What do you mean?" "Well, if it turns out someone was in the restaurant before the fire and didn't report it, it could complicate the insurance payout. And if that someone also works in the insurance field." I spread my hands eloquently. Blake sat in silence, staring into his coffee cup as if it might provide answers. "But I think we can work something out," I continued. "If you tell me the truth about what was happening between you and Emily, I'll think about overlooking certain inconsistencies in the case." He raised his head and looked at me. In his eyes was a mixture of fear and surprise. You know? I know more than you think. The question is whether you want to tell me everything yourself, or if I'll have to find out through other means." Blake sighed and lowered his head in defeat. "It started 3 months ago. Emily often came to the restaurant. We talked and something special developed between us. I didn't plan it, it just happened." "And the fire? Did that just happen too?" A long pause filled the space between us. The restaurant was going bankrupt. I had enormous debts. I didn't know what to do. Emily proposed a solution. She said she could help arrange the insurance payout if something happened to the restaurant. So you decided to set the fire. Not we. Me. Emily just helped with the paperwork. She didn't know about my plans for that night. This was a lie and we both knew it. But Blake was trying to protect Emily, which was oddly romantic under the circumstances. I understand, I said, standing up from the table. Thank you for your honesty. Jacob, what happens now? I looked at him and smiled. Now the most interesting part begins. That evening, I returned home and told Emily about my conversation with Blake. Of course, I embellished the details slightly to serve my purposes. Honey, I have something to tell you, I began over dinner. Today Blake confessed to me that he burned down the restaurant for insurance money. Emily choked on her food. What? Yes, imagine that. He asked me to help hide this from the investigation. Says he's ready to share the insurance money. And what did you tell him? Nothing yet. But I think this is a great opportunity for us. Half of the insurance sum is a lot of money. Emily was silent, clearly trying to understand what was happening. You want to help him hide a crime? Why not? If we can benefit from it. By the way, he said you helped him arrange the insurance. Is that true? She nodded without raising her eyes. Wonderful. Then you're already partially involved. Blake says that without your help, he couldn't have processed the documents so quickly. Emily paled. She was beginning to understand the trap she had fallen into. Jacob, I just helped arrange the insurance. Nothing more. Of course, dear. I understand you. We'll just help an old friend and earn a little from it. For the next few days, Emily walked around on edge. She was obviously afraid that I would discover the truth about her affair with Blake, but at the same time couldn't understand why I was proposing to become an accomplice to a crime. Blake was also nervous. He called me several times trying to understand my intentions. Each time I said something vague, keeping him in suspense, letting his imagination fill in the worst-case scenarios. A week later, I suggested we all meet to discuss the details of our deal. We agreed to meet at a roadside motel, neutral territory where no one would see us. Emily was nervous all day. She tried several times to convince me to abandon this idea. Jacob, maybe we shouldn't? This is too risky. Don't worry, dear. Everything will be fine. We'll just talk and agree on the terms. That evening we arrived at the motel. Blake was already waiting in one of the rooms. When we entered, he looked like he was going to his execution. Well, friends, I said, sitting in the armchair, let's discuss our partnership. Emily and Blake sat on the edge of the bed trying not to look at each other. Jacob, Blake began, I've been thinking about our conversation. Maybe it's better to just forget about all this? Forget? After you told me everything? It's too late to drink mineral water when your kidneys have already failed. I stood up and began pacing around the room. Here's what I propose. We create a united front. I help close the fire investigation, you get the insurance money, and we all live happily. What if someone suspects something? Emily asked. No one will suspect anything if we stick together. By the way, Emily, Blake told me very interesting things about your collaboration. She looked sharply at Blake, then at me. What did he tell you? Well, about how you spent time discussing insurance details. About your consultations. Heavy silence fell. Emily and Blake looked at each other, then at me. Jacob, Emily said quietly, what do you mean? I smiled and took out my phone. I mean this. The security camera video began playing on the screen. Emily and Blake entering the restaurant, and an hour later, exiting. Emily gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Blake just sat there staring at the floor. So, I continued calmly, now let's talk for real. You thought you could fool me, pull off an insurance scam, and also betray me in my own bed. Emily started crying. Blake raised his head and looked into my eyes. What do you want from us? Justice. And a little entertainment. I sat across from them and pulled out a folder of documents from my bag. Here are copies of all the evidence. Video from the camera, insurance documents, witness statements. Enough to put you both away for several years. You want to turn us in to the police? Emily asked through tears. Not necessarily. I have a better plan. I pulled out another document. This is a divorce petition. Emily, you'll sign it right now. You'll renounce any claims to property, alimony, or anything else. What if I refuse? Then tomorrow morning the police will receive all the evidence. And you'll go to trial not only for insurance fraud but also as an accomplice to arson. Emily looked at the document with trembling hands. What about Blake? Blake has two options. Either he confesses to the arson and returns all the insurance money, or I hand the case over to detectives. Blake nodded. I agree. Wonderful. But that's not all. I stood up and walked to the window. Emily, you'll also write a confession letter about your participation in the scam. A detailed description of how you helped Blake defraud the insurance company. I'll keep this letter as a guarantee that you'll never appear in my life again. What about Blake? Blake will write a similar letter about his actions. And add some interesting details about your affair. Dates, places, details. Everything that might be needed if either of you decides you can blackmail me in the future. They both remained silent, understanding the hopelessness of their situation. You have 2 hours to write and sign everything. After that, you have 48 hours to leave the city. Forever. Where will we go? Blake asked. I don't care. You can go to California, you can go to Alaska. The main thing is that I never see you again. The next 2 hours passed in silence. Emily and Blake wrote their confessions while I sat in the armchair reading a magazine. Sometimes one of them tried to say something, but I just pointed to the paper. When everything was ready, I checked the documents. Excellent. Now let's agree on the final details. I turned to Emily. Tomorrow you take vacation from work. Say you're going to visit a sick aunt in another city. In 2 days you submit your resignation. Reason? Moving to join your husband in another state. Then to Blake. You go to the insurance company tomorrow and write a statement refusing the payout. Say you found other investors and decided to start over. In 2 days you disappear from the city. What if someone asks where we are? Emily asked quietly. Say a rich relative from New York called you, offering a good job. I'll tell everyone I'm very happy for you and support your decision. I looked at my watch. Time's up. You can go. They stood up and slowly walked to the door. At the exit, Emily turned around. Jacob, don't say anything. Everything's already been said. The next 2 days passed like a fog. Emily packed her things, trying to behave naturally. I helped her, even joked sometimes. The neighbors saw a happy couple preparing for new opportunities. Friday evening, Emily put the last box in her car. I'm leaving, she said. Have a safe trip. Call when you get there. She nodded and got behind the wheel. When the car disappeared around the corner, I felt peace for the first time in months. Blake disappeared from the city even earlier. Someone saw him loading things into a pickup truck early Saturday morning. The restaurant remained empty with a sign reading closed for reconstruction. A month passed. I received a message from the lawyer. The divorce was officially finalized. Emily didn't appear at the hearing, which only accelerated the process. Another month later, I received an unsigned email. Just one line, we're in Oregon. Started a new life. Thank you. I deleted the email without responding. Life in the city quickly returned to normal. People occasionally asked about Emily and I told them about her new job in the big city. Everyone considered me lucky. After all, my wife had found such a wonderful opportunity. 3 months later, I met Lindsay at a cafe, a new teacher at the local school. She had moved from another state after divorcing her husband. We started dating and gradually I felt I could trust someone again. A year later, Lindsay and I got married. At the wedding, everyone said I looked happier than ever. And it was true. Sometimes I think about Emily and Blake. I wonder if they stayed together, or if their affair couldn't withstand the test of reality. Do they regret what happened or do they blame me for their downfall? But more often I think about the importance of knowing the price of trust. And that sometimes the best revenge is giving people what they want, but in such a way that they understand the true cost of their desires. Emily wanted a new life with her lover. She got it. Along with all the consequences, responsibility, and understanding that it's impossible to build happiness on deception. And I got the opportunity to start over, with someone who values honesty as much as I do. But there's more to the story that I haven't told anyone, not even Lindsay. About 6 months after Emily and Blake left, I received another visit from an unexpected source. It was a Tuesday afternoon when a woman in her 40s knocked on my door. She had Blake's eyes and nervous energy. Are you Jacob Martinez? She asked. Yes, who's asking? My name is Rose Harrison. I think you knew my husband as Blake Rodriguez. My blood ran cold. Blake's real wife had found me. I'm sorry, I don't understand. May I come in? We need to talk about what my husband did here, and what happened to the woman he was with. I let her in, my mind racing. How much did she know? How had she found me? Rose sat down in my living room and pulled out a thick folder. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago when Blake started taking frequent business trips. I know about the restaurant, the fire, the insurance fraud, and Emily. She opened the folder and showed me photographs, Blake and Emily entering the restaurant, leaving together, intimate moments in what looked like a hotel room. I know you caught them and made them leave town. I know about the confessions they wrote. And I know they're living together in Oregon under assumed names. I remained silent, unsure where this was going. I'm not here to cause trouble for you, Mr. Martinez. Actually, I want to thank you. Thank me? Blake put our children and me at risk with his criminal behavior. If his scheme had succeeded, we would have been implicated. You stopped him before he could destroy more lives. Rose pulled out more documents. I'm divorcing him, of course. But I wanted you to know something else. Blake and Emily, their relationship isn't what they thought it would be. She showed me bank statements and credit reports. They're broke. Living in a trailer park, both working minimum wage jobs. Blake tried to start another restaurant, but his reputation followed him. Emily can't find work in accounting because word got out about her involvement in the fraud. How do you know all this? I still have access to some of Blake's accounts. And I have friends in Oregon who've been keeping an eye on them. Rose stood up to leave. They thought they were getting a fairy tale romance and easy money. Instead, they got exactly what they deserved, each other and the consequences of their choices. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about cosmic justice. Emily and Blake had gotten their wish. They were together, free from their old lives. But freedom came with a price they hadn't expected. Years passed. Lindsay and I built a good life together. She never asked too many questions about my first marriage, and I appreciated that. We had 2 children, bought a bigger house, created the kind of stable, honest relationship I had thought I'd had with Emily. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder about the alternative timeline where I had simply confronted Emily about the affair, demanded counseling, tried to save our marriage. But then I would remember the cold calculation in her eyes when she lied to me, the way she had been willing to risk everything for a man she barely knew. Trust, I learned, isn't just about fidelity. It's about honesty, integrity, the willingness to face problems together instead of seeking escape through deception and crime. 5 years after the divorce, I received one final communication. A postcard from Portland with no return address. On the front was a picture of Mount Hood. On the back, in Emily's handwriting, "Some mistakes can't be undone. I hope you found happiness." I showed the postcard to Lindsay. "Someone from your past?" she asked. "Someone who learned too late that actions have consequences." I threw the postcard away. Some chapters of life need to stay closed. But the story doesn't end there. Last year, I was contacted by a documentary filmmaker who was making a film about insurance fraud. Someone had told her about Blake's case, and she wanted to interview me about the investigation. During our conversation, she mentioned something that surprised me. "Did you know that Blake Rodriguez, or Harrison, his real name, has been arrested 3 more times for insurance fraud in different states? What about Emily? She's clean as far as we can tell. Seems like she learned her lesson. She's working as a waitress in Seattle, going to night school to get certified in a different field." So Emily had learned something from our experience. Blake apparently had not. The filmmaker asked if I thought my methods had been ethical. I gave them exactly what they asked for, I said. They wanted to escape their lives through deception and crime. I helped them escape, along with all the consequences they hadn't considered. Do you regret how you handled it? I thought about that for a long time. No. If I had simply exposed them, they might have faced legal consequences, but they wouldn't have truly understood the cost of their choices. This way, they had to live with the reality of what they had chosen. The documentary never got made. The filmmaker said the story was too complex for a simple narrative. But our conversation made me reflect on everything that had happened. I realized that my revenge hadn't been about punishment. It had been about education. Emily and Blake had made their choices based on fantasy, the idea that they could have love and money and freedom without paying a price. Reality taught them differently. In the end, we all got what we deserved. Emily and Blake got each other and the consequences of their actions. I got a second chance at happiness with someone who shared my values. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all, not destroying someone, but letting them destroy themselves while you build something better. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.